Hello and welcome. I'm Darren, and today we're going to go through the next gen rumors, GPU rumors from both sides. Kind of what I think about it. I've sat back, gone through the rumors myself, and I've done it from a consumer point of view. So obviously, I buy a lot of tech. I have bought quite a lot of GPUs since I've been back at PC gaming. To be fair, I bought a lot of GPUs when I PC gamed 20 years ago, because back then you really were forced. I don't think you realise how lucky you have it nowadays compared to back then, when generally games were very, very few and far between. You'd wait a long time for a new release on PC back then, and when the new release came, it generally came with a new GPU, which was never a great feeling. So at least nowadays, you have options. But anyway, so the rumors of the next generation, and it's a strange one. So obviously AMD, from what they've been saying, from what is rumoured, from what is reported, probably this small amount that's come from them directly, but obviously a lot of it is still relying on rumours, certainly on the next top-end GPU then. Obviously at this moment in time I'm running the 7900 XTX, so I have the highest end GPU on the AMD platform. And if the rumours are anywhere near true, obviously AMD themselves have almost said that for the next generation they will be leaving the high end. It's not obviously something that I expect them to do for the future, but obviously for this generation, I believe, going back to the rumours I heard a long time ago, what they were working on for this generation didn't work out, or it was held back. So this is where they're at. And if the rumours are anything to be true, obviously naming scheme, who knows, but the highest end that apparently they will be offering, possibly with the name of the 8800 XT, will be something that will fall somewhere between the 7900 XT and the 7900 XTX, with an improvement in ray tracing performance, which obviously we've seen transferred into the PlayStation 5 Pro, or I say we haven't seen it yet, but to a degree we've seen it. And then obviously, who knows, there is obviously this rumour about AMD working on a new AI upscaler, again, something we've seen coming with the PlayStation 5 Pro. How that is implemented with the next generation of AMD GPUs, or how that integrates into the current generation of AMD GPUs, is yet to be seen. I'm on the fence on that one. I'm kind of, it can go two ways, and I can understand the reasons for doing it. Now, do we have enough or good enough hardware for what is needed in the current generation of AMD GPUs? Who knows? We obviously do have some AI cores or some AI accelerators. Do we have enough? Are they mature enough compared to what might be in the 8000 series? Will AMD be in a kind of, obviously because it has been done, and it's been done with Intel with XeSS. So obviously XeSS is available in a lower quality form for obviously the GPUs that don't have the accelerators that the Intel GPUs have. So whether this is something that happens with the new AMD FSR4, which it's being named as at this moment in time, who knows? And that will probably determine how the next generation of AMD GPUs sell. So for me, obviously, XTX, the actual raw specs of the 8800 XT are nothing for me to decide to purchase on. Now, am I going to be forced to purchase something like that, knowing that the AI upscaler could be a huge improvement, and it would only be available on the 8000 series? Well, maybe. I'd probably end up would buying it just to actually check it out. Not because I wanted or needed it, but I would no doubt be forced into believing that it was incredible, and I would like to see for myself to actually see that, because unfortunately we are kind of subjected to a lot of facts coming from people that have actually never even tried things. And I've seen it a lot. I read the comments all the time of obviously AMD users saying FSR is just as good as DLSS, that have never seen or used a Nvidia GPU. Now, generally, the people that have used both will disagree with that. It's not on a whole, it's not 100% of the time, but there is certainly, for me and for even the people in my chat that have both Nvidia GPUs and AMD GPUs, they will generally 100% agree that there is quite a big difference between DLSS and FSR. So rather than the new AI upscaler coming out, maybe not being able to use it and hearing thousands of repeats of how incredible it is, I'd probably have to buy it myself just to actually check it out, so that I knew myself, rather than listening to a lot of people that have absolutely zero experience with it, all in an echo chamber telling you how great it is. So that would probably, at this moment in time, be my only reason for buying AMD in the upcoming generation. Now, that doesn't mean that it's doom and gloom for AMD, because obviously I'm at the XTX level. Now, people at obviously already on lower hardware, or possibly people that held on to or still using 6000 series. Now, there will be people still using 6000 series. Certainly people probably around the 6800 XT that maybe thought of a 7800 XT. The 7800 XT offered them hardly anything if that was the level they wanted to stay at. So they probably were happy at that point, because I think a lot of people do generally stay on the same tier. So I think you'll probably find a lot of people that were, 2080 users probably went 2080, 3080, 4080. Probably a lot of people that were 70 series users went 2070, 3070 and 4070. Now 3070 wasn't a great card, so it might have made them change. I think, in fact, if I went through all the comments I read, a lot of 3070 owners were that pissed off with the 3070. They all generally now have 7900 XTXs, because a lot of people in the comments will say how great AMD is going from a 3070 to a 7900 XTX. Well, that ain't rocket science. You're talking like 3 tiers higher. But I could see their frustration. And VRAM was the ultimate killer on that card. Shit on Nvidia to do that, but it is what it is. So, and this kind of, a lot of what I'm looking at the moment is very VRAM orientated. So the 8800 XT, if it is to be believed what it is, has got a strange decision on the VRAM, because a GPU that falls in between the 7900 XT and the 7900 XTX is rumored to have 16 gigabytes of VRAM, which is a strange decision with both of those GPUs being over that. So obviously the 7900 XT has 20 gigabytes, the XTX has 24 gigabytes. Now 24 gigabytes for me is not something that I feel I have ever needed. And I have made this discussion before. I made this discussion around the Nvidia 30 series. So in that generation, I think AMD topped out in the 6000 series, topped out at 16 gigabytes. Now, I believe from what I read back then that Nvidia had decided they weren't going to do a Titan GPU. So they weren't going to be making something that was more for workflow. And instead, they were going to make one GPU, which was the 3090 at the time. Obviously, we then got 3090 Ti. I don't know if that was planned or if that was just a reaction to maybe the 6950 XT or a pricing. I'm not quite sure how that came around. But at the time, the 24 gigabytes of VRAM on the 3090, I don't believe, and from what I read, was never intended as something for gamers. I don't think there was ever any fear that gaming was suddenly going to use that much VRAM. So I believe that that was obviously more designed for people that were using their GPUs in any type of workload. And the downside to that was it was also the most powerful gaming GPU. So obviously a lot of people bought the 3090 and the 3090 Ti at the time with the 24 gigabytes of VRAM, which was obviously bundled into it, which was maybe not of need to them as gamers. And that was probably pretty much shown in the way that the next tier down came with 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So a huge difference between obviously the 12 and the 24. So then we get to what we have obviously being offered, or the rumors coming for the 50 series. And this is where I find it gets a little bit awkward, because at the moment, Nvidia wise, I'm on the 4080. So 4080, 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and power wise, we're around 300 watts. Let's say 300 watts. Let's just call it that ballpark figure. Now, I discounted the 4090 at the start of the generation. I thought I'd hold out, and then when the 4080 kind of became available at a decent price at the time, I ended up buying the 4080. So 4080, 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and like we said, it's around 300 watts. Let's call it 300 watts. And I was comfortable with that GPU. Now, I'm kind of against a GPU that pulls a huge ton of power, and I was kind of not overly comfortable with the XTX. It's not a game. It's not a killer, but it's a kind of it's a scored down, if that makes sense. And probably the reason for that was before I bought the 4080, I bought the 4070, and I was doing a build for one of my children, and the 4070 Founders was available. I can get a really good price on Founders cards. So I bought that GPU, and I was amazed at how powerful that was and how close that was to the 3080 Ti I was running from last generation. How close it came in performance, and the 3080 Ti was around a 400 watt card, and this thing was below 200 watts. Sometimes in some games I was seeing it more around 160 watts, and that I thought was amazing. I thought that was a huge advance in, obviously, a huge step forward. So obviously going back to huge kind of power hungry cards, I felt was kind of not something that I particularly wanted to do. But we're looking now at the rumors of the next generation of Nvidia. So we have obviously the 5080 rumors and the the 5080 and the 5090 rumors. So I'm not going to go through the full specs, but from what I'm looking at, obviously the 5080 is rumored with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's rumored to be around 400 watts. And we have again a flagship 5090, but this time with 32 gigabytes of VRAM and around 600 watts. And from what I've seen in the rumours, a shit ton of CUDA. So where does this fall into gaming and what I want? And it's very awkward because the 16 gigabytes of VRAM, I run at 4K. Now the 16 gigabytes of VRAM I have been happy with, and I've been kind of confident with this generation. If I wasn't, I don't think I'd have to do too much to move the wheel to make it work. Now, obviously, with AMD, it's been the 24 gigabytes, so that will be gone next generation. Their highest will be 16 gigabytes. And then going to the 5090, 32 gigabytes. Now, I never thought that 24 gigabytes was something that I needed. And you have to remember, obviously, 24 gigabytes doesn't come for free. You are paying for the 24 gigabytes of VRAM. And you are also paying in power draw. Now, obviously, these come, you're carrying this much memory. You're carrying a huge memory bus to carry this much memory. The higher the memory bus, the less efficient your GPU becomes. So this is obviously where your 600 watts will come from. And I'm kind of feel like I don't know if any of that feels appealing to me. Now, the 5080 rumored in power specs, depending on price, feels appealing to me, as in rumored to be slightly faster than the 4090. Now, if it came in at around about $1,000, we don't know yet. And it was around 4090 or slightly faster than the 4090. That feels appealing, but the 16 gigabytes of VRAM feels like, is that then safe to run into another 2 years at 4K? I don't know. Do I want to run that risk? I'm not sure. I did it with this generation. I felt confident with this generation, and it's pulled me through this generation. Nothing has come up to me so far that has caused me any issue. Now, obviously, AMD's next offering will only have 16 gigabytes of VRAM as well. And AMD do tend to use a little bit more than the 16 gigabytes of VRAM. The 32 gigabytes on the 5090, I just don't need it. Do I really want to pay? I don't know how much that GPU is going to be. Let's say £2,000. Now, what I want in that is the die. I want the die, and I want it packaged with something else which is more aimed for gamers. I want the die at 20 gigabytes of VRAM and a lower TDP. That's what I want. But Nvidia aren't going to do that, and they don't need to do that. And that's because the die that will go in the 5090 is worth a shit ton more in something else, in a work designed card, than what it is in a gaming GPU. So they want to add in everything else to raise the cost of that package, and I completely understand that. Why wouldn't they? But I just don't need it. Now, to me, that GPU with 32 gigabytes of VRAM and that much CUDA is aimed at people that are using it for work, for 3D rendering, and for AI. And those people probably, at the moment, as we speak, are running a system with dual 4090s in it. So this is obviously, it's almost going to give them that dual 4090 in one GPU. Maybe it will allow them to run dual 5090s and have an insane amount of, 64 gigabytes of VRAM and more CUDA than you can throw a wet fish at. So I don't know. It's kind of left me thinking, I stuck with 4080 through this generation, and the 4090, however appealing it was, I never felt, no, I'm going to have to go to the 4090. Now, the next generation is almost like the 5080 is the 4090, but with less VRAM. And the 5090 has so much stuff that I don't need. Do I really want to pay for it? Like, I feel like I need the GPU in between. So what I liked this generation was I went with the 4080, and up until now, it's probably the best decision I've made in a product that I've bought, because it was great from the start and it's great at the end, and it's still held its. Obviously, it's been overtaken by the 4080 Super, but the 4080 Super and the 4080 on paper are about the same, and the 4080 Super is selling for about the same price as what I originally bought my 4080. So it's still held its price. It hasn't been beaten by like a 4080 Super or 4080 Ti to the point it's made it irrelevant. They are a little bit faster, but I'm talking a little bit faster. So it's actually held well throughout the generation. And like I said, it held that well enough that it was never enough to tempt me to buy the 4090. Now, do I regret buying a 4090? Probably. I probably should have just bought the 4090. And I'm happy to say that. I'm not a child. I don't have to be, immature about it. Should I have bought the 4090? I probably should have. I kind of regret. The XTX isn't a brilliant card, but I kind of regret I didn't buy the 4090. And probably my reasons for that is I bought the XTX for the sim racing rig, and I probably would have preferred the power I would have got from the 4090 in the sim racing rig, and to be fair, the DLSS, because the way that I'm using my screen on the racing rig, I am actually relying on FSR quite a lot. And the one thing I've noticed about racing games is they have shit anti-aliasing. And before I ran the XTX on the sim racing rig, I was running the 3080 Ti, and I was using DLSS a lot on the 3080 Ti, obviously a lot less power, but I was using DLSS a lot, and it did make a lot of the games look a lot cleaner. Now obviously I'm using FSR on it, those games aren't looking as clean as what they look. I'm getting a lot more FPS with the XTX over the 3080 Ti, but the games aren't looking as clean as what they were on the 3080 Ti, which is like a bit of an annoyance. So I'm glad I bought the XTX. I wanted to try out the AMD for myself. You can't listen to, obviously, the echo chamber of comments, so I wanted to try it out. I'm glad I bought it. I won't be shifting it anytime soon. I'll probably keep it in the house. I'll be using it for something. But going back to the rumours of the GPUs that are obviously coming, honestly, I do not know. Nothing in there at this moment in time suits me. I'd almost be thinking, if I was going to buy the 5080, I might as well buy the 4090. And that is kind of probably quite obvious. Just buy the 4090. Or just wait for the price to drop so it's about exactly the same as what the 5080 is. And then effectively I'll have 50, very similar in power, but I'll have that 24 gigabytes, which might be something that comes into play throughout the next generation, or it might not matter. I don't know. Now, the only other thing that could come into play if it was something that was going to be announced relatively soon is both AMD and Nvidia have both rumoured, they've both spoken about using some sort of new memory compression technique. Now, whether that changes the outcome of VRAM usage and how it does it, I don't know. Now, if those were something that was going to come up quite shortly from both sides, and then the 16 gigabytes on the 8800 XT made sense, and then the 16 gigabytes on the 5080 made sense, then we would be in a different situation, because if the 5080 was to release around £1,000, and we knew for a fact that the 16 gigabytes was more than safe at 4K, then I would probably then buy it. But at this moment in time, as I say, I've got through this generation without the 4090, and now the 4090 on paper could actually be a better buy than the 5080, which kind of leads me to the only one GPU that at this moment rumored would be my upgrade, and that would be the 5090. And like I said, the 5090, however amazing, I have no doubt it will be in gaming, I will be paying a lot for features that I just don't need. And not only will I be paying for those features, I will be running at 600 watts to carry features that I do not need. And that, for me, is quite off-putting. So, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think, how you feel about the rumours, how you feel about the whole... I'm not going to say the VRAM situation, because too many people go fucking crazy over VRAM. It drives me insane. The amount of people that think that you need 24 gigabytes of VRAM to run 1080p gaming is off the scale. I'm not saying it's not important. VRAM's important when you run out. Up until running out, it's not that important. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about those rumours. I feel like a bit of a damp squid on that one. I kind of wish that the 4080, or sorry, this is a nightmare, the 5080 would have been rumoured to have slightly more than what it offered last time. I don't feel... It wouldn't have needed 24 gigabytes to make me feel happy. Now, I know that it's awkward because they can't do it in odd numbers. It doesn't work like that. But, you know, even if it was 18 gigabytes, I would have felt fine. If it was 20 gigabytes, fine. Obviously, 24 gigabytes, fine. I think that's overkill for gaming. If you're modding, that's fine. If you're modding, you're a different person. You need what you need, and you're in a niche subject where you have needs that not your general average, 99% of gamers need. So if you're not, then I don't think... I didn't buy the XTX because I thought 24 gigabytes was needed. And to be fair, I'm playing the XTX and I normally laugh when I start a new game at 4K, look at the 12 gigabytes of VRAM that I'm using and wonder why the fuck I've got so much that's just being wasted. But there we go. Like I said, it's kind of... It's an awkward one for me because I might this time have to run the risk of waiting it out, and when that will come, I don't know. I'm basically seeing if a 5080 Super or 5080 Ti is released with a bit more VRAM, which sucks, but it might be what I have to do this time around. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.